Good morning, everyone. I am Susan Moore Fontenot, the chair-elect of TAC, and I would like to welcome everyone to the October webinar hosted by the Community College Association of Texas Trustees. We are so glad you could join us in today's discussion on the regional labor market insights, which can empower your college's strategic planning and student advising efforts. In 2021, the Texas Association of Community Colleges partnered with the applied research team at Burning Glass to identify key occupations in Texas and the in demand skills along a career pathway. This year, the team extended the project to identify key occupations in each of the six TAC regions. We are honored to have the project lead with us today, Dr. Christina Flores, and she will explain the results of this very important work. As Director of Research and Evaluation, Christina supports the mission of the Texas Success Center in implementing all research evaluation processes. She manages internal and external collaborations to ensure projects are high quality, action oriented, equity focused, and aligned with the Texas Pathways Knowledge Development Agenda. Christina brings 15 years of teaching and administrative experience to her role. During her 11 years at Austin Community College, she served as an associate professor of mathematics, assistant dean of academic courses, developmental math advisor, and campus math contact to support improvements across the student experience. Christina holds a baccalaureate degree in mathematics from Georgetown University, a master's degree in mathematics from New York University, and a PhD in STEM education from the University of Texas at Austin. Christina, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Susan, for having me here today. I'm excited to share the results with you and the other esteemed board members and trustees on the call today about our applied research project for key occupations in Texas. So I invite you to use the chat and the Q&A function to ask questions as I go through. Nicole, who's on the line with us, will monitor that and I've given her permission to interrupt me at any time to answer any questions you may have as we go through. And I also want to give a little apology about my voice. I'm a little under the weather, but I'm going to do my best. And so I hope that we have a fruitful hour together learning about a labor market informed applied research project. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we think about knowledge development at the Texas Success Center, share with you our applied research partnership with Burning Glass, which was then MC, which is now Lightcast, talk a little bit about how we started this project and the impact of that phase one, thinking about the career pathways at the state level, and then get into some details about the second phase of the project where we moved into regional key occupations and career pathways. So at the Texas Success Center, we have the unique and awesome opportunity to learn about the impact of Texas Pathways, which is a guided pathways strategy adopted by all the community colleges in the state. Given this awesome and unique opportunity that we have full state commitment to Texas Pathways at the Texas Success Center, we create research that helps our colleges learn about what they're doing, where they're going, and how they can continue to improve guided pathways implementation to redesign the entire student experience. We have a knowledge development steering committee composed of researchers and practitioners in the state and the nation that guide our work. And we also do internal projects and commission external projects to make sure that we're gathering information as we learn together about how guided pathways changes college practices and student outcomes. So our goals are to build a knowledge base about how Texas Pathways is being implemented across the state, to enhance the impact of that strategy by sharing promising practices and learning about successes and challenges that we all face in transformative change, and to increase the capability of each of our colleges to perform research related to action on their campuses. So one of the big projects we've had over the past 2 years is a research partnership with labor market insight provider Lightcast. Now, Lightcast is a new name for the company that was formerly MC, for the company that was formerly Burning Glass. And so together, our team at the Texas Success Center and the applied research team at Lightcast, which I'll refer to them as Lightcast from this point forward, work together to think about how labor market information could inform the work that we were doing in Texas Pathways in each of our colleges. And the work that we do together aligns well, because you can see here that Lightcast's mission in education is to optimize program offerings, connect students to programs and careers, and communicate outcomes and impact. And so you can see that we were a good partnership to get together to think about how we might help our colleges think about the labor market as they develop programs. So the first phase was state labor market insights. So what we did is we met and we thought about the needs of the state and the opportunities for community colleges to serve the state based on what the labor market was telling us. So this resulted in the development of 15 key occupations and 15 associated career maps. And so I have a couple examples here for you, just two, I think, before we get to the regional ones, that share with you what we did in that first phase. So we identified 15 key occupations using several different metrics that were in demand and also led to a livable wage for community college graduates. So on the screen, you see an example here for cardiovascular technologists and technicians. The first slide represents some of the basic information about this career so that someone can understand what they're likely to have, what they're likely to earn, and understand the demand for that job at a quick glance. So this is again looking at the full state, and notice the date here. This project was started during COVID, and we were able to discern that a cardiovascular technologist could expect a median salary of about $52,500, that we were expecting growth in this field, and the majority of the jobs were for entry-level applicants. Only a few of these jobs required a baccalaureate degree, and the automation risk was low. So Burning Glass used Osborne and Frey's methodology for this, and I'll get into details about what that means when we look at the regional labor market, but in a nutshell, it means, could a computer do this job? And so when we think about a cardiovascular technologist and technician who's working with patients, no, probably a computer is not going to be likely to do that job in the future. We also identified top 5 specialized skills related from the job postings data, the top 5 required certifications, and the top 5 employers by demand. And lastly, we identified the industries by which these jobs fell, under what industries. So a question might be, how is this type of information useful to our colleges as they think about developing programs and serving students in their state? Well, what we did to try and answer that question and provide a usable career map was we did a skills gap analysis, thinking about where students may come from to enter into training for this key occupation, and then where they may go with continued training. And so that key occupation is something that our community colleges are capable of developing programs to serve students. So those key occupations are mostly sub-baccalaureate, because we know that we don't have so many baccalaureate degrees yet offered at community colleges. And so we thought about, where might we find students who are looking to upskill? How could we upskill them to get them to this key occupation? And then how could we inform them of what's possible for them afterwards with continued upskilling and reskilling as well? All of this came about in our discussions about the use of micro and short-term credentials when COVID hit and disrupted the educational system and disrupted the lives of ourselves and our students. And what we thought about was the fact that the labor market was going to be shifting relatively quickly during that time. And we knew that we were going to need to be able to create short-term programs that helped students take advantage of the knowledge they already had and add to it in a way that we knew would prepare them for a key occupation in the state. This morphed into the TRUE strategy, the Texas Reskilling and Upskilling Through Education strategy, which was something that we worked on at TAC and ultimately became legislation during the last legislative session. We were really excited to be thought partners in this work and to also provide proof points that 12 of our colleges produced TRUE credentials in a 90-day cycle, mind you, and implemented them the next semester to show that our colleges were capable of doing these skills-based micro-credentials. And so you can see on this screen an example from North Central Texas College. So North Central Texas College has an EKG technician certification. It's 2 courses completed in 15 weeks. You can see the cost here. Now this may be different. This cost estimate was about 2 years ago, but it includes tuition, textbook, lab materials, and the certificate testing fee. So we can see here how our colleges can immediately serve a need in the labor market and prepare students for an in-demand job. I have one more example to share with you from the statewide work, and then we'll get into the regional work. So we're going to look at the key occupation statewide slide here for heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration mechanics and installers. So again, along the top, you see that kind of snapshot information about the occupation, median salary, how we project this to grow in Texas, how many of these jobs are entry level, how many require a baccalaureate degree, and the automation risk. You see again the top 5 specialized skills, certifications, and employers, and the industries to which this occupation applies. You'll also notice on this slide that this was a Texas Workforce Commission target occupation, which is also something we took into consideration when we were identifying these key occupations. Once again, we can see here that our colleges were able to describe a career pathway where they may find students looking to upskill or reskill to be an HVAC mechanic and installer, and how these folks could then continue on with additional training on their career pathway to other jobs as well. Again, you can see here an example of how one of our colleges implemented a TRUE credential to be able to meet this need. At Austin Community College, the HVAC certification has 4 courses, can be completed in 16 to 20 weeks, and you can see the cost and tuition from 2 years ago. You also see some completion numbers here and job placement numbers. So again, we see that in the Central Texas region, Austin Community College is serving their students well and serving the labor market needs associated with their region. So you may be thinking, oh my goodness, well, we did this at the state level. What about the differences by region? What if these occupations don't apply, or maybe we're just catching what's important in the metroplexes? And we heard you. And so in the second phase of this applied research project, we drilled down deeper. So this is the bulk of our conversation today. I'm talking about what we learned in the second phase, where we took a look at each of our 6 TAC regions. So we honed in on our methodology for identifying key occupations. And so I'm going to go ahead and explain to you all of the different factors that we took into account when we went to identify a key occupation. Each of the factors that I'm going to explain to you went into an algorithm. I'm a math person, so I love an algorithm, and created a single score for the occupation, which we called the target index. Once we had the target index, we also called in members from the Business Advisory Council and from the tax staff to, if you will, give it a sniff test and see if we need to change the weights on our target index methodology. And this process took a couple of months till we were all satisfied with both our folks in the field and our researchers that we had the correct algorithm to identify the key occupations in each region. So the first thing that went into this designation was typical education. So as I mentioned, the goal of this particular project is to make sure that our community colleges are aware of the needs in their region in the labor market and can design and scale programs to meet those needs. So because of that, we chose typical education to be limited to sub-baccalaureate degrees. Again, this is the majority of the degrees that our colleges offer, and so we wanted to make sure that we were selecting occupations that our community colleges could prepare students for with their existing programs or by creating new programs that were not baccalaureate degrees. Lightcast then went to their jobs data. And what they did is they looked for the number of unique job postings geographically constrained to that region. So this requires that a job be posted on the internet. And so we know that this isn't going to capture every job in the region, but it captures most of the jobs because we know that we're living in an age where folks are posting their jobs on the internet. So they looked at those uniquely because we also know that employers post on more than one site, and so they make sure to remove duplicates from that count. Then we also looked at the number of jobs. So that is actually from the Bureau of Labor Statistics about how many people are currently employed in that job. So we're getting the demand and we're getting the current supply. And at the Texas Success Center, we are passionate about improving socioeconomic mobility and creating programs that allow students to complete and enter a job with a livable wage that can support themselves and their families. So when we took a look at wages, we looked at actual wages from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we used the 10th percentile as a proxy for entry-level wages. So what that means is it takes everybody who's currently reporting income from that job, and we figured that the lower 10% might represent those entry-level jobs. And so we chose 10% to kind of mimic what we might think an entry-level wage could be. This was also constrained to the region. Also, the standard in labor market insights is the median earnings. And so that's important as well, because we want to know what the middle folk, the middle person in this career is making as well. So we took into account entry-level wages, but we also wanted to know on average what folks were going to make in this job. The next thing was regional and state location quotients. Now I won't get into like all the details here, but this is a relative demand measure. So what this means is this. You take a look in the region and we say, okay, how many folks are asking or posting these jobs? And then we compare that to the state. How many folks are posting this job at the state? And what we want to know is if this job is more in demand in this region compared to the state, or less in demand for this region compared to the state. Because what we want to do, or what we were thinking, is that we are going to train folks who are generally going to stay in that region. And so they want to know that they can stay in the region because that job is relatively more in demand where they are currently than it is in the rest of the state. We also then looked at the state compared to the nation. So is this job in Texas more in demand than it is in the rest of the country, which might suggest that a student would stay in state to get that job, as opposed to the other way around, where we might expect a student would leave the state if that job was in much higher demand elsewhere. So both of those are relative demand that help us understand, of course, we can't predict perfectly, but what a student might do. Would they stay in their region or stay in the state based on what we know about the demand in those two areas? Next is automation index. Now, I will mention that when Burning Glass did this project the first time, they used an existing framework for automation, and Lightcast used that framework, but they also have a proprietary method. So the automation index is a proprietary tool created by Lightcast that helps us understand whether or not a computer is likely to take over this job from a human in the next 5 to 10 years. So what we want here is obviously something where a human is going to continue to need to do it so that we're training humans for jobs that they can do. The numbers when I show you aren't going to make much sense other than our goal is to keep it near average or below average likelihood that a human could do this instead of a computer. And then the last two measures that went into our target index were the 5-year and 10-year projections. Now, I will tell you, having looked through labor market insights during the pandemic and as the pandemic has normalized, we saw shifts in all different directions. As you might imagine, respiratory therapists, phlebotomists, those kinds of jobs were accelerating at a pace we couldn't even imagine, right? We always knew they were in demand, and other jobs were shifting as the workforce shift. We have seen that these jobs have now kind of, the projections have leveled out, but to capture that volatility, we looked at both the 5-year and 10-year projections. This is again a tool created by Lightcast, where they use several different measures to predict whether this job is going to grow in the next 5 and 10 years. So not to bore you any further about the target index, but here's a little bit more information of what I explained in words. We will make these slides available, so if you want to go back and learn a little bit about those as well, here's just more information about each of those factors. And then once we put all of those into our algorithm, once we worked with our employer partners, our team members, and the applied research team to agree on the weights for each of those measures, we then applied that index number to each occupation in the region. And then we went through the top 25, did another round of sniff tests, and you'll see that we've produced 5 key occupations for each region. Now, this does not mean in any ways that these are the only 5 key occupations for the region. It does not necessarily mean that they're the most in demand, because as you know, there's all these other factors that went into that, including demand. But it does mean that we took a holistic view of the occupation, and we wanted to create a skills gap analysis that would help our colleges understand the labor market in their region and start to prepare programs that could prepare students to meet that need. So I'm going to go through what the new slides look like, the phase 2 slides. This is just an example, and I have some physical examples to show you as well in a second. But you can see here that we still included information on the slides about job growth projections. And you'll see this slide has both the 5-year and 10-year growth rate, as well as the actual number of jobs that are predicted for this occupation. Next, we have annual earnings. Now, I love this little box. It lets you put on your little analyst hat and think about what's going on in your region, because what we show here are the reported earnings in 2020. This is actually what employed individuals reported to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So there you see that the reporting earnings for folks in this occupation. But then we have the advertised earnings. So this is what employers are posting on job postings. Now, advertised earnings are on this slide, but let me remind you, they were actually not in the target index. We used the actual Bureau of Labor Statistics in our target index, but we felt that this was a really interesting data point to show on the slide, because we can think about our region and why there might be a disparity here. Is it that the demand is increasing, employers are having to raise the wages to attract more workers? Or is it a case where we see that this job is, advertising for a full-time job, but then not putting folks in full-time work? But this is also important for our colleges to understand when they're advising students, that realistically, we do have to keep in mind that the advertised earnings may not be what they're making and focus on the reported earnings. So we wanted to equip our colleges with both the knowledge they needed to develop in-demand programs, but also to advise students on what they might expect. Now, this is a snapshot in one point in time, however. So it could be the case that if demand has increased and employers have had to react to that demand by increasing salaries, that if we were to take this snapshot a year later, we might see those reported earnings going up, right? But I do want to point out that we use the actual earnings from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in that target index. And then on the right, you see here top skills gap. So this is pretty interesting. So as I mentioned, Lightcast uses data from online job postings to create much of this information that you see on the slide. So what this means is that at the top, the job postings for this occupation may have listed these skills that they want from their employees that they're going to hire. Lightcast also has a second set of data called worker profile data. Now, worker profile data is more limited than the job postings data because it mines data from folks who have online resumes. Now, you and I both know that not everybody who has a job puts their resume online, right? But for those that do, this indicates here an opportunity that when they look at the worker profile data, there is an opportunity for colleges in this particular example to maybe offer these skills that are not showing up as in demand as perhaps the labor market is suggesting we need. So this is really just an opportunity area again to identify some skills that our colleges may consider adding to their programs to make their workers more attractive for these jobs. Also on the snapshot slide are some of that same information from the first round, and that is the common qualifications required for the particular job, industry sectors, employers, and there's that automation risk. Now, let me tell you, the numbers don't mean so much, but we want them to be close to average or below average, right? That's what we're looking for in order to understand that a computer is not likely to do this job and it's likely to remain a human job in the future. All of that information also went into, like you saw the last time, a similarity model where we're looking at those starter occupations, the key occupations, and the advancer occupations. So as you mentioned, the first step was for us to identify the key occupations and then match them to starter and advancer occupations. And so our Lightcast team helped us do this using similar skills in the job postings. We then created a skills gap analysis. What would a person need to move from a starter occupation to a key occupation? And what would a person need to move from a key occupation to an advanced occupation? So this is the same kind of analysis that we did at the statewide level. And then we developed the career maps. So I'm going to show you some examples. And as I mentioned, Nicole, please interrupt me if anyone is represented in one of these regions and wants me to slow down when we get to those slides and talk about their occupations. Don't worry, I didn't put all 30 into this presentation, but all 30 are on our website, and we'll drop that into the chat so that you have it. But I do have one example from each region to show you how we're thinking about this and how our colleges may be able to use this information to develop and scale skills-based programs. So I'm going to pause for a second and not read all these out, but I'll give you an opportunity to read what each of the 5 occupations were in the Central region and the East region. All right, so for the Central Texas region, we're going to look at the licensed, my little bar is covering it, the licensed practical and vocational nurses. So we went through this information before, but now we can see it related to this actual job. So this job is constrained by geography. We did a county, we have county by county definitions of our 6 TAC regions. And so you can see the number of unique job postings in Central Texas for LPNs and LVNs, and you can see the projected growth. Now, none of us should be surprised that our nursing is growing. It's always an in-demand program. Our RN and LPN and LVN programs are always high in demand. But certainly given the fact that we're living through a pandemic, this job is becoming even more high in demand. You can see that change in demand potentially in the annual earnings difference again, right? So LightCast does not tell us why these are different. That's why I'm saying you get to put your little analyst hat on and think about why these two things might be different. But certainly this is a case where perhaps they're trying to attract folks to this job by offering more money than what folks actually made in 2020. You can see here as well top skills gaps, where there's opportunities for our colleges to identify these skills and offer them to our students, and perhaps in this new digital world, help our students display those skills digitally as well, so they show up in these worker profiles. But a lot of opportunity here based on what employees are saying they are needing and what workers are saying they have. Some common qualifications probably aren't surprising here in the nursing degree and industry sectors. These top employers, again, are constrained to the Central Texas region. So you know that you can tell a student to go look up these folks and they're looking for jobs and they'll be able to find some in-demand jobs right there in their region. Low risk here of a computer doing the work of a licensed or practical vocational nurse. But we want to make sure we're keeping that in mind. And again, keeping it at or below average of that number. Let me move next to the skills gap here. Okay, so this is our skills gap analysis. Now you'll notice that on this particular slide, I don't have a true example like I did in the last one, because we've just launched these. And we, of course, will be surveying our colleges and gathering feedback about how they've used these so that we can produce information for our external stakeholders about how our colleges are meeting the need with specific enhancements to their programs or even new programs. So you can see here the starter occupation. These are folks who might be looking to upskill. They have a good job, but maybe they're looking to improve their salary or improve their skills. And so you can see here an opportunity for our colleges to ensure that these skills are embedded into their existing programs or create new short-term and micro-credentials that can enhance their existing programs with additional skills and certifications for their students. Once our students become equipped to be an LPN or LVN, you can see that these folks in the starter occupations are going to see a nice boost to their earnings here. But we know that our students are lifelong learners, right? We work and serve at community colleges that serve folks at all points in their life. And so we want to make sure that they understand that this isn't the end, that they can come back to us or one of our educational partners and continue along. Anytime that a job requires a baccalaureate degree, we've noted that on this slide. the only jobs that require baccalaureate degrees could potentially be under that next step occupation. And so that's a folk who would have to use one of our existing BA programs at the community college or transfer to become eligible for that next step occupation. But you can see here that we identified 2 next step occupations that can be served and trained for at a community college. And even a nurse practitioner might be able to train at some of our colleges or at a four-year partner, and the skills that someone would need to move into that next career and the associated salary bump. So my next example is from East Texas. And so for East Texas, we are looking at industrial engineering technologists and technicians. So again, the same information here, you're probably becoming an expert yourself, looking at this data and starting to interpret it. Some healthy growth. And interesting here about advertised earning and reporting earnings, right? So folks are actually doing better at this job than perhaps the employers are stating in their job postings, but again, a good talking point and good information for our students to be informed as they enter the workforce in this region. Now, you may think that there's nobody with these skills based on this top skills back box, but my interpretation of this is that industrial engineering technologists and technicians are not likely to have online resumes, but nonetheless, it does highlight the opportunity that our colleges have to make sure that they are offering the skills that employers are saying they need in this job. Some common qualifications, again, top industry sectors, employers, and a below average automation risk. So here we go again. We identified folks who may be looking to upskill and increase their wages to be able to be an industrial engineer, technologist, or technician. And again, this is an opportunity for our colleges to ensure their programs are offering the correct skills or develop new short-term programs to produce those skills in their region. Again, you can see folks can move on as well, and they can still stay within the technician and mechanic range of occupations here, but see some healthy bumps, again, making a case for community college programs in the East Texas region, really being able to prepare students to create a livable wage for themselves and their families. All right, I'll pause here for a second and let you read the identified key occupations in the North and South region. All right, so for North Texas here, the example I chose was paralegal and legal assistance. So healthy growth, some nice entry-level wages, some nice mid-level wages, a little more closeness here for the mid-level earnings. But again, some evidence that perhaps there's higher demand for those entry-level jobs based on the advertised earnings. Notice here that there's more skills identified in the skills gap. Perhaps paralegals and legal assistants are more likely to have an online resume that Lightcast was able to mine for this data, but certainly here information about the types of skills that our colleges should be offering. Along the bottom, we see the same information about qualifications, industry sectors, employers, and a low likelihood that a computer can do the work of a paralegal or legal assistant. So here we have a nice career map again, noting where folks might be ready to upskill, the skills that they can acquire, the associated salary boost, and then how they can become a paralegal and legal assistant. If you take a look at the right, you'll see some really interesting kind of shifts here where folks may move on. You won't see lawyer though. So you may be thinking, oh, a paralegal and a legal assistant may want to be a lawyer. That's absolutely true, but we did not choose anything that required a doctorate for our next step occupation, but certainly that is an option. And we couldn't really think about an interim job to list here for the next step occupation, but you'll notice that, of course, a lawyer is a next step occupation for paralegal and legal assistants, but there's several steps for them to get there that we didn't identify on this slide. In South Texas, the example I prepared is for computer network support specialists, a great growth rate here, indications that there may be higher demand at the entry level. Again, some skills that are opportunity areas for our colleges to address: common qualifications, top industry sectors, top employers, and interestingly enough, a low likelihood that a computer could be a computer network support specialist. Now, these folks are working with clients, and so that is why they have to troubleshoot and be able to understand what the client needs, and create the support to enhance networks that are existing in different areas. Again, here, a nice career map, identifying where we may find folks ready to upskill to become a computer network support specialist, and where they may continue on to their next step occupation. So once again, we see here some pretty high salaries for jobs that don't necessarily require a baccalaureate degree. Again, enhance identifying opportunities for our colleges to really serve our students and create programs that get them into in-demand high-wage jobs in their area. Okay, I'll pause one last time and let you read the key occupations we identified in the Southeast and West regions. All right, so here we see our friend cardiovascular technologists and technicians for the Southeast Texas region. I believe we looked at this at the state level when we started the presentation. It was also a key occupation at the state. But here again, some healthy growth. This advertised earnings, woof, right? What is going on here? So this is a great conversation to have with a student to ensure they're informed. And also it gives them some bargaining power as well if they achieve the skills they need and the certifications they need to be able to advocate for themselves in the workforce. Again, some opportunities for skills gaps, qualifications, I sound like a broken record, industry sectors, employers, and automation risk. So again, our colleges are already well prepared and already provide more than 90% of the workforce credentials in the state. And so when we think about another way that this could be used, would be to think about the programs that need resources to scale up. And our healthcare professions and healthcare programs are actually need a lot of resources to be able to expand the students they serve, right? They have medical equipment and very specialized staff. And so when we think about how in demand this is, we also have to think about the resources that we provide our colleges to be able to scale up and meet this demand. So again, you can see here some skills to acquire that our colleges already are great at offering, but may be able to offer more of, or may be able to create stackable credentials where a student can work on these skills independently of a program or enhance an existing program with additional skills and qualifications. We then see that we can move on. All the jobs on the right for this one as well can be prepared for at a community college that don't require a baccalaureate degree. And so our colleges can again use that information to make sure that we are directing resources to healthcare programs so that they are able to scale up some of these opportunities that are identified in their region. For West Texas, heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers. This one and nurses are always the top of the list by demand, and they remain at the top of the list even when we take into account those other factors in the target index. So these are always high demand jobs in our state. So pretty big 10-year growth rate expected here. All those computer trucks don't seem to necessarily be in our direct future. Again, we see a pretty significant gap here between reporting and advertised earnings. And the folks on the line who know about heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers may understand what that means. It could be a case where they're advertising for full time and the worker doesn't mean it, but nonetheless, it tells us something about what's going on in the labor market for heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers. Again, these folks may not be likely to have online resumes, but nonetheless, we can use that skills gap to understand where those skills are that employers want. Not surprised to see a CDL for a common qualification. Many industries served by heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers, employers in that actual region, and a slightly higher than average automation risk here, but still not likely in the next 5 or 10 years that we're just going to have computers driving trucks all over the place. So it's still probably a very human capital intensive field. Now, this was interesting. Heavy tractor truck trailer drivers, when we thought about the career pathway, we thought, where would you go after a heavy and tractor truck trailer driving job? It was more intuitive for us to identify the starter occupations and folks who might be ready to upskill, but we really needed to think about where this job would lead. And so we thought, when maybe folks don't want to drive truck anymore, they may be ready to get out and think about what they've learned. So a logistician, which I think I pronounced correctly, is a person who thinks about logistics and plans for how supply chains and other things may be enhanced and be more efficient for companies. And that seemed like a really reasonable job that someone with that on the ground experience could potentially see in the future if they didn't want to drive truck. We also thought about management. So maybe if you want to get off the road, you could start to manage in some of those warehouses. And so that's how we came up with these next step occupations, thinking about what someone might need to be able to move to that next job, but also being able to communicate that there are opportunities out there to use that experience that you have to produce your and the skills taught by your local community college to become eligible for these occupations that would get you off the road eventually if that's what you wanted. So I'm a little ahead of time, which is not like me because I'm often very wordy, but I'll pause here and see if anybody has any questions or anything in the chat or Q&A, Nicole. I'm happy to go back and look in more detail on any particular occupation, but I'll just turn the floor over to Nicole and Susan.
Thank you so much, Christina. This was such great detailed work that you, like you mentioned, you spent 2 years on this project. And so it's hard to sum up in just 1 hour, I'm sure. And I'm very impressed by your speed in getting through this content. So I'm going to give people a little bit of time to think about what their questions might be. I welcome you to put it either in the chat or on the Q&A function. I do want to say, like, looking at the attendee list, we have people from all of the different regions. And so I'm glad you were able to spotlight examples and share the list of the key occupations. I wonder if maybe Susan wanted to add any thoughts while we wait for questions to come in.
Sure. This was excellent, just so well presented. Excuse me, I've got that same hoarseness. As we think about our regents who are primarily viewing, and I see we do have our president from Lee College that's visiting. Think about regents. What would be the next step as a regent has viewed this information and they want to take it back to their colleges? How would you guide them in assuring that they can utilize this data to benefit their college?
Thank you, Susan. That's a great question. So we have 2 ways that we've been working with our colleges with this data. The first one, when we had the 12 proof point colleges doing the true work in 2021, was that we actually tried to mimic this work at the college service area level. And so what that means is actually going from region down to college service area by county. Interestingly enough, when you take into account all the key factors, there isn't that much variation in the top jobs, but you do see variations in like the 20 to 25 jobs range. But we can pull all of that data for colleges so that they can start to think about beyond the top 5, where there's other places that they can start looking at their programs. Then the second piece, that's just identifying. So what are the occupations in demand beyond these top 5 in your region or even in your service area? And then the second part is really at the programmatic level. So since we are the #1 workforce provider in the state, and by us, I mean community colleges, we already have really great teams and advisory committees on each of our campuses for each of these programs. And so when you go through an annual or every other year program review, these slides or this applied research project can really help you take a look at the skills being offered in your programs, along with the advice from your advisory committee, to identify where you might need to enhance your program or where you might need to help your students sell themselves a little bit better. So if you're already offering these skills, how do we make sure our students are aware that they are equipped with these skills and are very, what's the word I'm looking for, attractive in the labor market? On the flip side, if you notice that you're not offering these skills, this is an opportunity to get your program level chairs involved, to think about the types of programs that may need to be grown, or short-term or micro credentials that can be embedded along a program pathway to meet these needs. And then once you've identified what programs you might want, the board members can get involved, because you may need some more capital, more resources to really shift around the types of programs and the way that resources are allocated to be able to grow or potentially shrink other programs. Now, that's a very wide scale view of it, but what we're hoping to do also is provide technical training and assistance so that our colleges can start to do this type of analysis on their own campuses and create labor market partnerships with both Lightcast, but also with the free tools available from the Workforce Commission. So I'll tie that to the question I see in the chat about the folks at Houston Community College working with this data. I will say that while they weren't a part of this project, I do know that they are now working with Lightcast on their own version of this for the Houston metro area. And so this is, again, an exciting extension of this project to see that our friends at Houston found value in this region and then went ahead and started to think about, again, their service area, shrinking down from the region of their service area and perhaps expanding the number of occupations they explore. So we're hopeful to be able to continue our partnership with Lightcast in one way or another, and continue the way that we provide technical training and assistance to all the stakeholders at our colleges to make sure they know about these resources, and then also gather from you all and from others how they might be useful in program development and in resource allocation and things like that. So we've already had some interest from several colleges to go ahead and look at their service area. I can pull reports from my access to the tools, and I do that for our colleges. The only thing that I can't do is that skills gap analysis. So that was kind of the applied research team that Lightcast helped us with. And so we're hopeful to continue that relationship so that we can think through developing more career pathways or getting more granular, more, whatever we think would serve our college as well and ultimately serve our students well. So that was a long-winded answer, but I hope it answered your question.
Well, it certainly did. I think it's very, very helpful for those who are listening in our audience today. I have another question on upskilling. Many of our colleges work with their business and industry in their communities, and there are opportunities for workforce development type programs and collaborations. So, where do you see when students are trying to upskill in their current jobs? Where do you see greater opportunities for workforce development opportunities?
That's a great question. So one of the things that I believe our community colleges could start to do well is advertise what's possible at their college and think through making very clear and publicly available these types of career maps. I'm sure that many of you on the line can agree with me that as myself, even myself, starting out as a teacher, I didn't necessarily go into teaching and see for myself a full career map or for a full pathway of opportunities for myself, right? I was a 21-year-old high school teacher, so I thought about the next day getting through my lesson plans and teaching and things like that. But would be really helpful, and this role that our community colleges, in particular our advising staff, can play, is helping students understand that within the lifespan of their career and workforce participation, that these opportunities exist. So when we're advising and onboarding students, tools like a career map can help them understand that, yes, you can stay in a good job for several years, but you can come back to us, and we're always going to be here to provide you these skills when you're ready to move on. The other reality we know is that over 3/4 of our community college students are part-time students, because our students are often taking care of family and having to work through school and other responsibilities. So helping a student understand that while they may take longer to get an associate's degree, they can get these short-term and micro credentials that make them attractive and valuable in the workforce, so that they can continue to upskill even while they may be taking longer to produce that traditional degree. So I think there's several ways when we talk to our students that we can present opportunities to them, and also make clear that the community college, their local community college, can serve them along the lifespan of their career. And so I think there's a great opportunity in communication and marketing and advising. Now, these jobs are going to necessarily evolve and change, right? So we have to keep up with the local labor market, all the fluctuations and all of that. But communication strategies, marketing strategies, and advising strategies can help the students update their awareness of what's available to them in their own local region.
Well, that was a wealth of information. I have truly enjoyed this, and I'm sure our audience has too. We can tell by the questions that were asked. We really do appreciate you, Christina, for taking your time out to share this, and I'm sure some of our member colleges will be reaching out to you to see how their services you can provide more services to them directly.
Absolutely. I look forward to that.
All right, Nicole, are there any other questions that we need to take from the chat?
No, we can go ahead and move to the closing comments.
Okay, very good. Well, speaking of closing comments, earlier this week, the Texas Commission on Community College Finance held their final meeting and voted to approve the set of recommendations that will be submitted to the legislature by November the 1st. That's great news. Those recommendations address the imperative need for state funding formula that reflects community colleges' critical role in providing students of all backgrounds with access to high quality and affordable academic programs, workforce education training, and continuing education opportunities. we had we are so excited for this opportunity. The Commission's recommendations can be transformational for Texas community colleges and ultimately for helping Texans achieve their full potential while uplifting the entire state. We hope that you will join next month's webinar that will be co hosted by TAC and CAT to bring trustees and CEOs up to speed on the results from the Commission and plans for the next legislative session. Next, I'd like to share trustee leadership seminars that are forthcoming. First, we want to thank our friends from Amarillo College for hosting last month's trustee leadership seminar in West Texas. I look forward to seeing many of you in East Texas on November the 18th for the next trustee leadership seminar that will be hosted by Tyler Junior College. Early this week, we announced our opening keynote, Dr. Linda Garcia, the executive director of the Center for Community College Student Engagement. I am so excited to announce that Representative Matt Schaefer from House District 6 will be joining us as well. Please register for this in person event, and Nicole has shared the Eventbrite link in the chat. Thank you very much, Nicole. And finally, I'd like to share our ACCT conference, which everyone's gearing up for next week. So, last but not least, I want to take a moment to recognize Trustee Rose Benavides from South Texas College. Rose is the incoming chair of the ACCT Board of Directors, which is our CATS counterpart, national counterpart. We will celebrate the beginning of her term during a reception at the ACCT Leadership Congress in New York City next Friday evening. So mark your calendars, and we hope to see everyone there. I look forward to connecting with each of you at our upcoming events. Nicole, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I did throw one more slide in here. We have set the date for our 2023 annual conference. And so we hope you all mark your calendars now so you'll be able to join us in Fort Worth for that. But I just want to say once more how much I appreciate the time of Christina and Susan as well for being here today and participating in the webinar and sharing your insights. And Susan, those were some great questions at the end. So I appreciate both of you for being here today, and we'll see you at the next one.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, everyone.